So for problem number 1, it says inverse sine 1/2. So they give us the ratio, so we want the angle. You know for inverse sine that our answer is going to be between negative 90 degrees and positive 90 degrees. Since it's a positive ratio, we know we're looking in this first quadrant. And you're saying, at what angle is sine 1/2? So we know that at 30 degrees, it's root 3 over 2 for cos, 1/2 for sine. So our answer would be at 30 degrees, that's between 0 and 90, or you could say pi over 6 if you do it in radians. So for the next one, it's saying the same thing. At what angle is cos going to be negative 1/2? So I always first think about first quadrant, where is cos 1/2 in quadrant 1, and then I reflect. Now, if you know that the ratio is negative, you know that we're going to be looking for an angle right in here in quadrant 2 between 90 and 180. So we know the value is going to be in here between 90 and 180, but first let's think about the reflection. Okay, so we first think about quadrant 1, that's what I do, and I say, okay, where's cos 1/2? I kind of disregard the sign. So I know at 60 degrees, cos is positive 1/2. So if I take that line and I reflect it across this y-axis, I know the difference between that line, 60 degrees and the y-axis, is 30, because between 60 and 90 is 30. So then I know that green line, if it was reflected, is going to be 30 away from 90. And so if you do the 30 plus the 90, that gets you 120 degrees. So at 120 degrees, if you reflected what the first value we had, you would get negative 1/2 common root 3 over 2. So the cos at 120 degrees is negative 1/2. So our answer is either 120 degrees, if we want to leave it as degrees, or we could say 2 pi over 3. Remember to convert. If I have degrees and I want to go to radians, I would multiply by pi over 180 degrees, and when I simplify, I'll get 2 pi over 3. Okay, so for number 3, when it says arc tan parentheses negative root 3 over 3, we know that that's inverse tan negative root 3 over 3. So we're looking for the angle where we're going to have a ratio for tan of negative root 3 over 3. Now we know our answer again is between negative 90 and positive 90, or negative pi over 2 to positive pi over 2. So I always just think first quadrant. I disregard the negative. So I ask myself, where is tangent in quadrant 1 root 3 over 3? And its tangent is root 3 over 3 at 30 degrees. But if it's a negative value, and we know we're looking down here, then our answer is going to be negative 30 because of the reflection. So up is positive 30 and down is negative 30. So our answer is negative 30 degrees. Now remember, I was noticing some people were making mistakes because they were saying that it might have been 330 degrees. It's that same spot, but because of our restrictions, our answer needs to be between negative 90 and positive 90. So negative 30 is our answer if you write it in degrees. Okay, so for number 4, we're saying at what angle will sine be negative root 2 over 2? It's got to be between negative 90 and positive 90. So I always first look in quadrant 1. I know that sine will be root 2 over 2 at 45 degrees. Okay, so I need to reflect that because I'm looking for negative root 2 over 2. Sine will be negative down here. So we know that we've swung down negative 45 degrees. So our answer is negative 45 degrees. Or you could say negative pi over 4. Both are correct. One's radians, one's degrees. So first we work inside. We're trying to find the sine at 5 pi over 4. So the first thing I do, I'm given the angle, right? This is in radians. So I'm going to convert 5 pi over 4 into degrees. That helps me. It's a little bit easier. So if I do that, I will get 225 degrees. So now I know that on the inside, we're working with sine of 225 degrees. So at 225 degrees, what's the sine? So 225 is right down here. first of all, if you think about it, when you remember all students take calculus, we know down here that sine is going to be a negative answer. And if we know that from 180 to 225, that's 45 degrees, we're looking at the reflection of the 45-degree angle. So I know that it's going to be the negative root 2 over 2, negative root 2 over 2 at that spot. So I know the sine is negative root 2 over 2. It makes sense because if it's all students take calculus, sine at 225 must be negative. So we have negative root 2 over 2. Now we're going to find the inverse cos. So we're saying at what angle is cos negative root 2 over 2, and we're restricted between 0 and 180. Now if we know it's a negative value, our answer is going to be between 90 and 180. So I was looking at this and I thought, okay, if I'm looking for something with root 2's and 2's, in the first quadrant at 45 degrees, cosine is going to be root 2 over 2. So I decided, okay, I'm going to reflect that. So if that's at 45 degrees, I know the space between that and the y-axis is going to be another 45. So then from 90, and if I add that equal amount of space, 45, will get me that angle, 135 degrees. So my final answer is 135 degrees, or if you convert, you would get 3 pi over 4. Okay, so for the first step for number 6, I look for the inside. What's the tangent of 5 pi over 4? So I'm given the angle 5 pi over 4, or 225 degrees. So I'm trying to find the tangent. So remember, for 30, 45, 60, our tangent values were 1, root 3 over 3. So 45 degrees tangent is 1, right? So at 225 degrees, I know that's a reflection of that original 45 degree point, right? So if I took the 45 degree point and I reflect to the y-axis, that's 45. I reflect, it's 45. Reflect to the x-axis, it's 45. Reflect another 45. We're down at 225 degrees. So the tangent there would also be some form of 1. Then we have to think positive or negative. If you remember, all students take calculus. In quadrant 3, tan is positive. So our tan value is 1. So the tan at 225 is 1. Now we're going to find inverse sine of 1. So we know that our answer is going to be between negative 90 and positive 90. And don't forget that on the axes we have nice ordered pairs. Oops. So between negative 90 and positive 90, the sine, or the right side, is positive 1 at 90 degrees. So answer is 90 degrees, or you could say pi over 2. Okay, so for this next problem, we do inside out first. So for the inside, when it says cos of pi over 9, we do have to use our calculator for this one. So you'd be told use your calculator. Pi over 9 is not an angle on our unit circle, so we're going to use our calculator. So mode does matter. When it says sine, cosine, tan of an angle, your mode does matter right now. Sine, cosine, tan of an angle. So I need to make sure that my mode right now is set in radians. And when I hit cos of pi over 9, I should get about 0.9397. Now I'm going to find the inverse cos of that value. When you're finding the inverse cos, the mode doesn't matter. You're just going to hit the mode that you want. So if we want our answer in radians, we would make sure our mode's in radians. If we want our answer in degrees, we would make sure our mode is in degrees. So if I hit mode degrees before I start this, I'm saying at what angle am I going to have this value? If I put degrees, I hit inverse cos, I put that all in the calculator, I'm going to get out about 20 degrees. Okay, so for this first problem, I'm trying to find at what angle is cos negative root 3 over 2. So I always work in first quadrant. I know my answer is between 0 and 180. In first quadrant, I ask myself, where is cos some form of root 3 over 2? At 30 degrees. Okay, so I'm going to reflect that and see where I end up in second quadrant. So I know the difference from 30 to the y-axis is 60. So then I know the difference from the y-axis down to that reflected point is going to be 90 plus 60, or 150. So I know at 150 degrees, my cos is negative root 3 over 2. So my cos is negative root 3 over 2 at 150 degrees. Now we're saying what's the tangent at 150 degrees. So if we look at that spot, I first look at the original spot that came from, where it was reflected from, and I know at 30 degrees the tangent is root 3 over 3. So we know it's going to be some form of root 3 over 3, but we have to think, is it positive or negative? And if we remember, all students take calculus. In the second quadrant, only sine is positive, therefore the tangent is negative. So our answer needs to be negative root 3 over 3.